Hey guys, Jeff here with Corsair. We're going to be doing an AMD-based micro ATX build in our Obsidian Series 350D case here. All the materials here came in at a cost of under $800, so we're looking to build kind of a good bang for your buck type of system. The components, just to kind of go over real quick, we've got an R7850 from AMD for the graphics, which should be able to play all the latest games for quite a while, including Battlefield 4. We've got an ASRock motherboard here, the FM2A75 Pro4-M micro ATX version. We've got an AMD chip here, the X4 750K. Motherboard CPU came in at under $200, and they're going to provide some really good performance for us, especially if we want to overclock the CPU, which we will definitely have the option to do since we're going to be using our H55 Hydro Series cooler. We've also got 8 gigabytes of Vengeance low-profile memory running at 1600 megahertz Cas9, and powering this system we've got the CX500. Should be plenty of juice for all of our components. And the last thing here running the system is going to be our Neutron GTX 120. This was a little bit pricier than some of the other drives. You could definitely swap it out for a Force GS to save a little bit of money, or even just use a regular hard drive and upgrade to an SSD in the future. So that's our list of components. Let's go ahead and jump right in and get this board installed. And actually, even before installing the board in here, I like to get the CPU installed before I actually get the board in the case, just because you have a little bit more room than when the board is installed. So we'll get our CPU out here. And our motherboard will definitely need the I/O shield. So on any CPU, Intel or AMD, you're going to find a little yellow arrow or a golden arrow on one of the corners, and that's going to have a corresponding arrow in the CPU socket. So you'll know that you're installing it in the right way. And in this case, looks like it's bottom left side. Just drop it in, lock it in place, and CPU's installed. Next step is to get the board in the case. The 350D actually has a guide pin in the center for where the center hole mounts, so it lines up your motherboard in your case very easily. Almost forgot our I/O panel, or I/O shield. Let's make sure we get that in there. Just pops right in the back. So we've got the board set in there. You can see the guidance pin has lined everything up perfectly. The screws can be found in the hard drive bay here in this accessory box. And I think that's the last one. All right, so the next step I usually like to do is get the power supply installed. Since you're going to have to route some cables, it's good to do that before you get a whole bunch of hardware in there that will get in the way for sure. The CX500 is an excellent power supply, excellent low-cost power supply. It's 80+ certified and runs very quietly, so it's a good choice for a small build like this. So the power supply just slides right into place. There's a little guide rail there. Make sure you get it in there just right. Power supply also comes with all the hardware required to install it, so you can find the 4 mounting screws in there, and also a bunch of zip ties to clean up your cables when you're done. Just 4 screws to mount the power supply. All right, power supply is installed. We'll flip the case up and take off the rear side panel of the 350D and start routing some of the cables that we will need to plug in for the motherboard. Alright, so you've got all these handy little grommets to hide your cables on the 350D. And we'll first make sure we get our big 24-pin connector squared away. So it pops out right there. Make sure the clip is on the right side where it can hit that little locking mechanism. It'll lock into place. There we go, one down. The other one we'll want to do right now is our CPU 12-volt EPS connector, which should be around here somewhere. Make sure you don't confuse it with the PCI Express connector. The CPU one has can split into 2 4s. The PCI Express only splits into 6 to 8, so that's how you can tell the difference there. We'll route this through the same way. And you can see the back side. Plenty of space to route cables behind the motherboard. Keeps the cables out of the way, makes it look cleaner, but also having the cables back there means there's less junk in the way of the airflow. All right, so power is all set. The rest of these cables will just kind of stick out of the way for now until we get some more components installed that require power. And the next thing I like to do is usually the cooler, because that's another component that requires, or is a lot easier to install when you have a lot of space before you have your graphics and your memory installed. So we've got our H55, which is a 120mm radiator cooler with a single fan. Definitely going to be much better than the stock cooler that comes with the AMD chip, and it's going to provide you quite a bit of room to overclock, especially with the chip that we have installed here. So here's our fan. Got some mounting brackets that we'll need to prepare. The H55, right out of the box works with AMD or Intel, so you're good to go either way. The AMD brackets, I already know, look a little bit different than the Intel. All right, so we've got all of our AMD mounting hardware laid out right here. We've got our cooler up on top ready to be installed, but first with the AMD socket, we'll have to remove the default mounting bracket here for the stock coolers. It's just 4 screws, 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. It should come right out. There we go. Now the back plate will push right out. Oop. Here's what the back looks like, and that's free now. So our back plate comes with 2 adhesive strips here. And that'll keep the back plate in place before we actually get it screwed into place and locked in. So there's some areas here that the double-sided foam tape here fits right in. So we've got our sticky strips in there. I forgot one thing. We want to make sure we put these metal posts into the bracket here. This is where we're going to mount the cooling unit. So they just press right in, just with your thumb, and fit right in there. All right, all 4 corners are installed, and they'll just line right up here. Stick our double-sided tape in there, make sure it's secure. And then on the other side, you can see our new mounting points. All right, so we're ready to prepare our bracket here. The smaller, thinner piece will go on the top of the bracket, and our screw will eventually go right through there. And it should just snap right into place with the base here, like so. All right, so the bracket is all set, ready to be screwed in. Now we're all set. Screws are in. And we don't want to screw it down all the way, not yet anyway, but just enough so that it stays in place. Since we still have to slide the cooling unit into the bracket. Actually, let's make some extra room here. We're going to be mounting it on the back of the case here, so I'm going to remove the existing fan. And we're going to use the fan that comes with the H55. All right, and the fan that comes with the H55, hopefully you can see this, it has some arrows which point in the direction that the air will flow, so this is going down, and also the way that the fan rotates. So we're going to have this set up as an exhaust fan, and you want each screw to have a washer on there initially, so it goes screw, washer, case, fan, and then radiator, which it screws into. That's the right order for All right, so radiator's installed, fan's installed. Make sure you take off the protective plastic here. Don't want that on there. You've already got some thermal interface material pre-applied to the cooling block here, so you don't need to use your own. You can, of course, if you'd like. You can just scrape this stuff off or clean that off and use your own. You'll see that there's little notches cut into the cooling unit here, which will align with the bracket. There we go. So that's on there. Good. Now we can just tighten it into place. So you can hand tighten it pretty much all the way with this particular cooler. It's really easy to screw in. And you might just give it a little quarter turn with a screwdriver just to, oh, maybe a little bit more. Just to make sure it gets all the way down in there. All right, so we have a couple things to plug in. First of all, the pump, which we have a nice handy power header here right above it. The fan also needs to be plugged in, and we'll plug that right into the CPU fan header. A lot of times if you have nothing plugged into the CPU fan header, the system will think you don't have any CPU cooler attached, and it'll throw an error at you when you first boot up. So you want to have something plugged in there. And that's pretty much the hardest stuff right there. Everything else is going to be a lot more straightforward. We can go ahead and get the hard drive installed, or the solid state drive. Actually, we've got our Neutron GTX drive here with the 350D. We've actually got a 2.5-inch drive cage that's dedicated to 2.5-inch drives. So all you got to do is slide it in. No screws required. That guy's mounted already. We can run some power to it, free up some of our cables from the I/O panel here, and actually, while we're getting this drive set up, we'll also run some of our front I/O cables and make sure that the controls on the front I/O panel all work. Come back over to the other side. The USB 3 header plugs in right below the 24-pin connector. Sometimes on some boards you'll find it down at the bottom. A lot of times if it's not there, it's right by the 24-pin. Here's all of our front I/O panel connectors, which are a lot of people's least favorite part of building a PC, just making sure you get all these plugged in correctly. If you have questions, the best thing to do is look in the motherboard manual. They should have a page dedicated to how exactly to do it. I've done it enough times that I can usually kind of figure it out though. Front panel connector is installed. Our audio header is right here on the back of the board, which we should be able to reach without a problem. Just figure out where your missing hole is and line it up with the missing pin to make sure you have the connector oriented the correct way. And there we go. All right, and we're going to get our SSD powered. Find a spare SATA power connector. Feed it through with the rest of the cables. Keep everything nice and neat, and plug it right in here. There we go. That's solid. Data connector, the SATA data connector will be in the motherboard box. Let me grab that real quick. Actually, you'll have at least 2, sometimes 4, sometimes 6, depending on the motherboard. This particular one, we've got 2 different ones. You've got one that's kind of an L shape, and then you've got one that's actually an L shape on one end, a straight on the other, and then one that has 2 straight connectors. So we're going to use the L-shaped connector here, which is a little bit more convenient for this type of a setup. And then feed it right through, find our SATA ports on the motherboard, which are down here, so feed it through right there. And when it comes to plugging in your primary hard drive, if you don't know which SATA port is the right one to use, again, check the motherboard manual. It'll be a different layout on each board. But generally they're labeled, and looks like number 1 is right here at the bottom. All right. Actually, let's do it from the bottom grommet here. All right, so the SSD is fully installed. We are left with just our memory and graphics card, I believe. And then we'll do a little bit of cable routing, and we should be able to be good to go. All right. So on our 7850 here, there's some protective plastic. A lot of cards will have this. You'll want to take it off before you install the card. Always the best, most fun part of installing your graphics card, peeling off that nice protective layer of plastic. Any electronics, really. Bam. Okay, and with this card, we've got one PCI Express connector. It's a 6-pin, so we'll keep that in mind. Got to make some room for the card. Grab my screwdriver. And it's a 2-slot card, so we're going to need the top 2 slots free. So you just want to line up the card and firmly lock it into the PCI Express slot. So card is plugged in. We'll secure it into the PCI slots with the same 2 screws that we removed from the slot covers. Alright, graphics card is screwed in. Just have to find a PCI Express cable. We just need one. So we'll untangle this from the massive cables there and feed it through. I mean, you could plug it in, but we're going to try to make this thing pretty neat and keep the cables, for the most part, on the rear side. And snaps right in. So our graphics card is ready to go. And the last thing remaining is our memory modules, our memory modules. And you'll see there's a little notch in the PCB here, and you'll see there's a kind of a key in the DIMM slot which you want to line up. The motherboard manual will also have a page dedicated to memory installation, so it'll have some recommended order of where to plug the modules in. In this case, it is the closest, and you skip one, so it's going to be the 0 and the 2 slots. So there we go. So we're pretty much good to go. We're going to do some cable management here, make this thing look a little bit neater, seal it up and boot it up, and we should be good to go. All right guys, so I cleaned up the cables, hid all the extra cables underneath the hard drive base, so they're out of the way. Got plenty of room for airflow. The front intake fan, you can see in this case, is pointed right at our graphics card, which is going to be the hottest component in the system, so it's going to stay nice and cool that way. On the back side, cleaned it up with a couple of zip ties. We provide plenty of zip ties with both the power supply and the case, so use them liberally. Keep the cables nice and neat, keep them out of the way, and you'll get a little bit better cooling out of the system, not to mention it'll look a lot better. So let's seal the system back up here. All right, one down, and we'll get our window back on. All right, and there you have it. So we weren't timing it or anything, but it probably took less than about 30 or 40 minutes to get the whole thing built. This is going to be a great gaming system for pretty much anybody in the entry level who's just building their first system or doesn't want to spend a whole lot to game on a PC. And this is definitely going to get the job done with this hardware that we have. So plenty of options to overclock, to upgrade in the future, and turn this into a really nice machine.